I stared at my reflection in the elevator's polished doors, straightening my tie one last time. Today would be my last day pretending, my last day playing the role of James Mitchell, the quiet, unassuming financial analyst at Maxwell Corp. 10 years of careful planning were about to pay off. The elevator dinged as it reached the 32nd floor. I could already hear the commotion from the main office space. Marcus Maxwell, CEO and majority owner of Maxwell Corp., had called an emergency all-hands meeting. Of course, I knew exactly what this meeting was about. My watch showed 9:27 a.m., right on schedule. I'd spent the last decade watching Marcus Maxwell destroy people's lives with his arrogance and greed. He'd start companies, drain them of resources, and discard employees like used paper towels. The pattern was always the same. Buy struggling businesses, strip them of assets, fire everyone, and walk away with millions while families lost everything. I knew his pattern intimately because 12 years ago, he did the same thing to my father's company. Maxwell Solutions had been my father's life's work, a software development firm that he built from nothing, working endless hours to create something meaningful. We weren't the biggest company, but we were innovative, and our employees were like family. Then Marcus Maxwell showed up with his promises of investment and expansion. Within 6 months, he'd forced my father out, stripped the company bare, and laid off all 156 employees. My father, broken by the betrayal and loss of his life's work, suffered a heart attack 3 months later. He didn't survive. I was fresh out of business school then, watching helplessly as everything my father built crumbled. But that day, standing over my father's grave, I made a promise. I would make Marcus Maxwell pay for what he'd done, not with violence or illegal actions, but by beating him at his own game. It took 2 years of careful planning before I made my first move. I legally changed my last name, altered my appearance enough to be unrecognizable from the young man who'd once attended company picnics at Maxwell Solutions, and began building my own investment portfolio. My father had taught me well. I knew how to spot undervalued assets and make smart investments. I started small, buying shares in struggling companies that I knew Maxwell would target. Then I'd sell before he could strip them, using the profits to buy more shares in other companies. Slowly, methodically, I built my wealth. But my real masterpiece was the building we were standing in right now. 5 years ago, when Maxwell Corp was looking for new office space, I created a shell company that purchased this entire building through a complex series of transactions. The price was steep, $120 million. But I knew Maxwell's ego would make him desperate to have the most prestigious address in the city. He signed a lease without realizing that every month, his exorbitant rent payments were going straight into my accounts. Now, standing in the crowded conference room, I watched as Marcus Maxwell strutted to the front, his expensive Italian suit and carefully styled gray hair radiating authority. Behind him, his son Derek, who he'd recently made COO, smirked at me from his position by the wall. They'd been planning this moment for weeks, thinking they were so clever. "I've called this meeting," Marcus began, his voice carrying that familiar false concern, "because we've uncovered some disturbing information." His eyes locked onto mine. "James Mitchell, please step forward." I complied, keeping my expression neutral as I moved to the front of the room. Around me, my coworkers shifted uncomfortably, already sensing what was coming. Maxwell Corp's emergency meetings had only ever meant one thing: someone was about to be publicly humiliated and fired. "Mr. Mitchell," Marcus continued, clearly relishing the moment, "we've discovered some concerning irregularities in your work. It seems you've been accessing confidential files outside your clearance level. Care to explain?" Of course I had been accessing those files, very carefully, making sure to leave just enough traces for their security team to find. The irregularities they discovered were breadcrumbs I deliberately left, leading them exactly where I wanted them to go. "I'm not sure what you mean, sir," I replied quietly, playing my role one last time. Derek stepped forward, waving a folder dramatically. "We have proof that you've been looking into our acquisition strategies, financial records, even my father's personal portfolio. You've broken at least 6 different NDAs." I noticed how several employees winced at Derek's tone. His reputation for cruel firing practices was well known throughout the company. Like father, like son. Marcus's face hardened. "We trusted you, James, gave you opportunities. And this is how you repay us? By spying? By violating company policy?" He turned to address the room. Let this be a lesson to everyone. Maxwell Corp does not tolerate corporate espionage or disloyalty. The irony of Marcus Maxwell talking about loyalty would have made me laugh if I wasn't so focused on timing this perfectly. Pack your things, Marcus commanded, pointing toward my desk. Security will escort you out, and don't think about trying to find another job in finance. We'll make sure everyone knows what you did. This was it, the moment I'd been waiting for. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope. Actually, Mr. Maxwell, I said, my voice suddenly stronger, clearer, I have something for you. The confusion on his face was priceless as I handed him the envelope. With trembling fingers, he tore it open and pulled out the contents, a thick stack of legal documents with one very important detail highlighted on the first page. I watched as his face turned from confusion to disbelief to something approaching terror. Behind him, Derek grabbed the papers, his own face draining of color as he read. This can't be right," Marcus stammered. "Oh, it's right," I replied, finally allowing myself to smile. "I think you'll find everything is perfectly in order. Those documents show that your lease agreement has been terminated, effective immediately. You have exactly 30 days to vacate the premises." The room had gone completely silent. Every eye was fixed on us, watching this drama unfold. I could almost feel the collective intake of breath as everyone waited to see what would happen next. Marcus's face had turned an interesting shade of purple. "You can't do this. We have a contract. A contract that specifically states the building owner can terminate the lease if the tenant engages in illegal activities." I countered smoothly. "Would you like me to detail the evidence I've gathered about your recent dealings with foreign shell companies? Or perhaps we should discuss the creative accounting in your last 3 quarterly reports." Derek lunged forward, but his father grabbed his arm, holding him back. Marcus knew exactly what I was talking about. The same shady practices he used to destroy my father's company. I had proof of all of them. Who are you?" Marcus whispered. I reached up and loosened my tie, no longer needing to maintain the facade of the meek financial analyst. "My name is James Sullivan. My father was Richard Sullivan, founder of Maxwell Solutions, the company you destroyed 12 years ago." The recognition in his eyes was immediate. He remembered my father, remembered the company he'd ruthlessly torn apart. Around us, whispers started spreading through the crowd as employees began connecting the dots. "That's impossible," Derek spat. "Sullivan's son disappeared years ago." "I didn't disappear," I corrected him. "I planned, I waited, I worked. And now, I own this building. In fact, I pulled another document from my pocket. I own quite a bit more than that." The second document I handed them showed just how many shares of Maxwell Corp I'd managed to acquire through various shell companies over the years. It wasn't enough for a controlling interest yet, but it was enough to cause serious problems if I decided to sell them all at once. Marcus's hands were shaking as he looked at the numbers. "What do you want?" But before I could answer, the elevator dinged and a team of security guards, my security guards, stepped into the room. The same guards who had been working in the building for years, quietly loyal to the real owner, not the tenant. "Mr. Sullivan," the head of security said, "would you like us to begin the evacuation process?" I smiled, savoring the moment. "Not yet, John. I think Mr. Maxwell and his son might need a few minutes to process this, but please do ensure that no one leaves with any company property. We wouldn't want any important evidence to go missing." The look of helpless rage on Marcus Maxwell's face was everything I dreamed it would be. For 10 years, I played the quiet, unremarkable employee, enduring his arrogance and cruelty. Now, finally, he was learning what it felt like to be powerless. But this was just the beginning. Phase 1 of my plan was complete. I'd taken their building, their security, their comfort. Phase 2 would hit them where it really hurt: their reputation, their business, and their precious family legacy. As Marcus and Derek Maxwell stood shell-shocked in the conference room, I turned to address the gathered employees. "Everyone, please check your emails. You'll find new employment contracts waiting for you. Sullivan Holdings, my company, is acquiring the legitimate parts of Maxwell Corp. Anyone who wishes to stay will receive a 15% raise and improved benefits." The room erupted in murmurs as people rushed to check their phones. I'd spent months preparing these contracts, ensuring they were more than fair. I wanted to show these employees what real leadership looked like. "This is illegal. Derek shouted, his face red with rage. "You can't just take over our company." I pulled out my phone, checking the time. Actually, in exactly 2 minutes, the SEC will be announcing a formal investigation into Maxwell Corp's financial practices. I believe the evidence they received from an anonymous source was quite compelling. Marcus grabbed the nearest desk to steady himself. "You've been planning this all along." 10 years, I confirmed. "The same amount of time it took you to build Maxwell Corp after destroying my father's company. Seems fitting, doesn't it?" Just then, every phone in the room started buzzing. The SEC announcement had dropped right on schedule. I watched as Marcus and Derek's faces turned ashen as they read the news. The building was just the beginning. I continued, my voice carrying across the now silent room. "While you were busy watching me access those dummy files you caught me with, I was actually documenting every illegal transaction, every shell company, every falsified report. Did you really think I'd work here for 10 years just to take your office space?" The security team moved closer, forming a barrier between the Maxwells and the exit. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see news vans already gathering in the street below. "My father believed in building things," I said, walking slowly toward Marcus. "He created jobs, supported families, invested in innovation. You only know how to destroy. How many lives have you ruined? How many families have you left broken?" Derek lunged forward again, but this time 2 security guards caught him. "You'll regret this," he snarled. "We have powerful friends." I smiled. You had powerful friends. Check your phones again." Right on cue, another wave of notifications hit. The major business news networks were breaking the story of Maxwell Corp's impending collapse. The stock was already in freefall. "Your friends are already distancing themselves," I explained. "Amazing how quickly loyalty disappears when there's nothing left to gain. By the way, those offshore accounts you think are hidden, they're being frozen as we speak." Marcus collapsed into a chair, his carefully maintained image of power completely shattered. "You've destroyed everything," he whispered. "No," I corrected him. "I've saved everything. The legitimate parts of Maxwell Corp will survive under new management. The employees will keep their jobs with better conditions. Only the corrupt parts, your parts, are being destroyed." I turned back to the employees, many of whom were still staring at their phones in disbelief. "Those who choose to stay will be part of something new. We'll build a company that creates value, not one that destroys it. The choice is yours." Sarah Chen, a brilliant programmer who'd been constantly overlooked by the Maxwells, stood up. "I'm staying," she announced firmly. Others quickly followed her lead, a chorus of "I'm staying" filling the room. Derek, watching his inherited power base crumble, finally broke. "Dad, do something," he pleaded. But Marcus Maxwell, the man who terrorized the business world for decades, just sat there, defeated. He knew it was over. Every ruthless tactic he used against others had been turned against him. "Security will escort you to clear out your personal belongings," I informed them. "You have 1 hour. After that, you're both banned from the building." As the guards led them toward their offices, I called out one last time, "Mr. Maxwell." He turned, his eyes hollow. "My father's heart attack? It wasn't just from stress. He discovered your plan to raid the company pension fund. He was going to expose you, wasn't he? That's why you moved up the timeline." The guilt in his eyes told me everything. After all these years, I finally had confirmation of what I'd long suspected. The employees you fired, they never got their full pensions. I've spent years tracking them down. They'll be receiving checks next week for everything they're owed, plus interest. That was the final blow. Marcus Maxwell, the corporate raider who'd built his fortune on broken dreams, shuffled away like a beaten dog, his son trailing behind him. The next few hours were a blur of activity. News crews tried to get into the building, but security kept them at bay. Our PR team, already prepared, released a statement announcing Sullivan Holdings' acquisition of Maxwell Corp's assets and the transition plan for employees. By evening, I stood in what had been Marcus Maxwell's corner office, watching the sunset paint the city skyline in shades of gold. On the desk sat a single photo, one of my father and me, taken at the last company picnic before Maxwell destroyed everything. "We did it, Dad," I whispered, touching the frame gently. "We made it right." A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. It was Sarah Chen, holding a stack of papers. "Mr. Sullivan." The transition team is ready for you. Please call me James, I said, turning away from the window. We have a lot of work ahead of us. She nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. The employees are calling it the greatest corporate takedown they've ever seen. I shook my head. It's not about the takedown. It's about what we build next. My father always said a company is more than balance sheets and profit margins. It's about people, innovation, and doing things right. As we walked out to meet the transition team, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. 10 years of careful planning, of maintaining my cover, of watching Marcus Maxwell hurt people, it was finally over. The next morning, as I walked through the lobby of my building, truly my building now, I saw the maintenance team taking down the Maxwell Corp sign. In its place, they were installing a new one, Sullivan Technologies. Employees nodded respectfully as I passed, no longer seeing the quiet analyst but recognizing the owner who'd orchestrated the most incredible corporate revenge story in recent memory. But I knew the real work was just beginning. Marcus and Derek Maxwell would face justice for their crimes. The SEC investigation would ensure that. But more importantly, we would rebuild something meaningful from the ashes of their corruption. My father had taught me that success isn't just about making money, it's about making a difference. As I stepped into my new office, I smiled at his photo on my desk. The Maxwells had spent decades tearing things down. Now it was time to start building them back up. Sometimes I realized the best revenge isn't just about destroying your enemies. It's about creating something better in place of what they tried to destroy. And that's exactly what I intended to do.